We are actually starting a new series this morning. Last week we finished a series of 4 sermons dealing with knowing Jesus, and we're basing all this on the church's new mission statement. Now, some might think it's rather simplistic because we can narrow it down to 3 words of know, follow, and share. We can expand it to 7 words of know Jesus, follow Jesus, and share His love. But the message is extraordinary because the world is so desperate to know that there is a God of love and a God of peace out there. We need to be sharing His message with others. So in order to do that, we need to know who Jesus is. And so we spent 4 weeks looking at that. We now need to understand that it's so much more important that we follow Jesus. We need to follow Him. And in following Christ, we need to understand how we can make a fresh start. We can start fresh. This is the first in our series on following Jesus. Now, as a Christian, have you ever thought things like this? Man, I've blown it again. Now, I know Jesus wouldn't act like that. Maybe I should give up. There is so much I don't understand about being a Christian. Will I ever learn my lesson? Can I be a Christian when I'm so easily tempted? Have you ever had questions like that go through your mind? Have you ever wanted to kick yourself in the seat of the pants over and over again because you have not lived the way you know a Christian should live? You haven't said the things you know a Christian should say. You haven't thought the things you know a Christian should think. Well, I've got good news for you. Jesus never asked anyone to get their act together before following Him. Jesus never asked people to fix all their past mistakes before following Him. Jesus never expects us to get a theological education before following Him. And Jesus never asks us to untangle the messes in our lives before following Him. Jesus' call was always this: why don't you start following me today, and then we'll straighten your life out. In fact, even the 12 apostles, the 12 who were hand-chosen by Christ, His closest followers, didn't look anything close to perfect. They were men who had problems. Let me give you some examples of what we're talking about. Out of the 12 apostles, we see over and over again where they struggled. They were proud. In Mark 9:33 and 34, Mark said they came to Capernaum, and when He was in the house, He asked them, "What was it you were arguing about by yourselves out on the road?" And they kept silent because on the road they had been arguing among themselves about who would be the greatest. I'm closer to Jesus than you. Oh, yeah? Well, he said this to me last week. No, I'm closer to Jesus than all of you. They were proud. They were overconfident. In Matthew 26, verse 33, Peter said to Jesus, "Even if everyone else stumbles because of you, I will never fall away. I will never stumble." And then just hours later, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. They were wimps. Yeah, the 12 apostles were wimps. All the disciples forsook Jesus and fled from His presence. That's what Matthew 26:56 tells us. I'll never stumble, I'll never fall away. And then when Jesus was arrested in the garden, all of them fled. For all the guts that they thought that they had, when the chips were down, and when it was going to cost them something to stand with Jesus, they all ran away. Does that sound familiar? Maybe we've done that. Maybe we've had pressure on us at work or at school or in our family or at a friend's house, and suddenly we make the decision, I'm not going to say anything about Jesus. I'm just not going to open up that can of worms. We've wimped out. They didn't understand what Jesus was trying to teach. In John 10, verse 6, John says Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things he spoke to them. In Luke chapter 9, verse 45, Luke said, they did not understand, and they were afraid to ask him about this saying. So they didn't understand, but they didn't want to look stupid, and so they kept their mouths shut. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you've felt like there was something you didn't understand that was preached. Or maybe you didn't understand something that you've read in the Bible this week. Or maybe you're trying to figure out, what is it that God wants me to do with this situation I'm in? And you may say, I really don't know enough to be a Christian. But we also see that the apostles were vengeful. In Luke 9, verses 52 through 54, we're told about a time that Jesus and his apostles entered a village of the Samaritans, which were their enemies. And the Samaritans did not welcome them. They would not let them come through the city gates. They said, you are not to come in here. And the disciples, James and John, saw the way the Samaritans treated Jesus. And they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them just as Elijah did? Oh, great attitude, guys. What a wonderful way to look at things. Does it sound familiar to you? We may not necessarily be calling fire down from heaven, but today we might say, Lord, let me kick him in the teeth just once. Just once. Let him have it. If you've struggled to become a real Christian, and it's been hard, I want you to be encouraged. These guys were the ones that Jesus chose to walk with him, to spend time with him. They were not perfect, but they responded when Jesus called upon them to forsake their old lives and to follow him. And even though these men were Christ followers, they struggled because they found themselves going back to their old lifestyles and their old ways. And you know what? When that happens to us, Jesus understands. He calls us to do the same thing. He doesn't say, I want you to instantly become a Bible scholar. He does not say, I want you to instantly become perfect. Now that you're my follower, you have to do things perfectly. But he does say this, I want you to leave everything else behind, and I want you to follow me. He wants us to become Christ followers, to become Christians. I can be a Christ follower if I will forsake the old life and follow him. Now, the rest of this message is dealing with how to forsake our old lives and start new lives. It's so much more important that we follow Jesus than simply know Jesus. The first thing we can do if we are going to forsake our old lives and start a new life is to realize that Jesus is calling us to follow him. I'd like you to turn to the Gospel of Matthew. And here is the first of the many calls Jesus made to these men to become specifically his close followers, his apostles. In Matthew chapter 4, I want to look at starting at verse 18. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets to follow him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their father, and they followed Jesus. We need to realize that Jesus is calling us. He does call us. He calls us apart from this life, and he calls us to specific ministry and specific service and to servanthood. Some people never make a commitment to Jesus because they never realize that he is calling. He is calling you. It is so much more than just attending church or trying to be a good person. When Jesus calls us to him, he is calling us to leave behind the things that used to be and to totally commit ourselves to following him. He calls us. He calls us to something that's life-transforming. But the second thing we need to understand is that we must seize the moment. When these four were called, when Peter and Andrew and James and John were called by Jesus to follow, they immediately left what they were doing and they followed him. That's what Matthew 4:20 says. Jesus doesn't ask us to wait until we have everything together for us to follow him. Now, I really love this attitude of Christ because I love the way he affected the attitude of these first followers. These guys immediately left their nets and they followed Jesus. No delays. They realized that they have been made an offer that was the chance of a lifetime. And they seized the moment. Follow the Son of God? I'd be crazy not to. Now, we know as we look at the other gospel accounts that some of these were already followers of John. They'd already been introduced to Jesus by John the Baptist. And so they've already had some encounters with him, but now the specific invitation, won't you be mine? Won't you follow me? And they left everything and they followed. They seized the moment. How many of you have read Dr. Seuss books to your kids? How many still like to read Dr. Seuss books? You know, you might be a closet Dr. Seuss fan. I don't know. But he wrote one poem that was in a collection of his poems, not the name of a book by itself. And this reminds me of a lot of people when they're called upon to follow God. The poem is called A Zode in the Road by Dr. Seuss. Now, you know what kind of tongue twisters he has, so bear with me as I read through this. Did I ever tell you about the young Zode who came to two sides in the fork of a road? He looked on the one way and then the other way too, so the Zode had to make up his mind what to do. Well, the Zode scratched his head, his chin, and his pants, and he said to himself, now I'll be taking a chance. If I go to place one, that place may be hot. So how do I know if I'll like it or not? But on the other hand, though, I'll feel such a fool. If I go to place two, I may find it too cool. In that case, I may catch a chill and turn blue. So place one may be best, and not place two. On the other hand, though, if place one is too high, I may get a terrible earache and die. On the other hand, though, if place two is too low, I might get some terrible pain in my toe. So place one may be the best. And he started to go. And he stopped and he said, on the other hand, though, on the other hand, on the other hand, on the other hand, though, and for 36 hours, one half of that Zode made starts and he made stops at the fork in the road, saying, no, don't take that chance. It may not be right. And then he got an idea that was wonderfully bright. Play safe, cried the Zode. I'm no dunce. I'll simply start off to both places at once. And that's how the Zode, who would not take a chance, got no place at all with a split in his pants. Yeah, split in his pants. But isn't that what happens when Jesus calls us to serve him? And we say, yeah, but yeah, no, yeah. We are called to follow Jesus, to take the road less traveled, to belong to the one who wants us forever. We cannot wait around and let the sense of God's presence slip away from us. When Jesus walks by and you sense him calling, that's your chance. Seize the moment. Mother Teresa once said, yesterday is gone, tomorrow has not yet come, we have only today, let us begin. Seize the moment. Thirdly, we need to understand that we must recognize what needs to be changed. In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus encountered a tax collector by the name of Matthew, or Levi. And in verse 9 it says, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax booth or the tax office. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he arose and he followed him. There are some things that we simply need to leave behind in order to follow Jesus. Now, tax collectors in that day were generally crooked. They would overcharge people for their taxes, and then the government of Rome would allow them to pocket the extra. And that's why they were hated so much by everyone. This guy named Matthew or Levi could not continue to be what he was and follow Jesus. He had to take a very hard, real look at himself, and he had to say, if I follow Jesus, what do I need to leave behind? This step is called repentance. It is changing our mind about sin. It is demonstrating that change of mind and heart by our actions. It is a crucial step in beginning to follow Jesus. What if Matthew had said, "Jesus, I believe in you, but..." And then he continued to cheat his fellow man. If we're considering following Jesus today, or if we're at a point in our lives when we realize we need to start over, we need a fresh start, we've been a Christian, but we've really slipped away, it's time for us to come back, I want you to pay attention to what I'm about to say. And I want you to understand, it's not Tom Cash saying it, but it is the Holy Spirit of God. It is the voice of God saying it in your heart right now. And I want you to tune into this. God is telling you that there are some things in your life that need to change. It may be a habit. It may be an attitude. It might be drunkenness, or lust, or dishonesty, or greed. It might be any of 100 other things, but God knows what you need to change. And it might be something you don't really want to give up. You might enjoy it too much. But understand this. The adventure of following Jesus is worth anything it costs us. Anything. We need to recognize what needs to change. And finally, as we follow Jesus, we cannot let anything deter us from doing so. Don't let anything deter you from following Jesus. In Matthew chapter 4, verses 21 and 22, Matthew said, going on from there, he saw two brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They were mending their nets. He called them, and they immediately left the boat and their father, and they followed Jesus. Commitment. Commitment to following Jesus is always going to cost us something. Period. It always will. It always has. It may cost us a friend. Family members might decide that they don't want to go with us when we start following Jesus. If you notice, James and John had to leave their father Zebedee behind. Girlfriends may decide that's not for them. Boyfriends may decide that you've just absolutely gone crazy if you say you're going to be a Christian. A husband or wife may never come to church with you, but that should not deter you from following Jesus. Chrysostom was a church leader in the city of Constantinople during the 4th century when Rome was actively and aggressively persecuting the church, when they were arresting and trying people just because they're Christian. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, you're talking about the 4th century. That doesn't happen now. Oh, it happens. It happens in countries where Christianity is outlawed. It happens in countries, even this year, where Christian ministers and pastors have been executed only because they refuse to renounce Jesus Christ. It happens today. Well, for Chrysostom, the Roman emperor had him arrested, and he had him charged with being a Christian. If Chrysostom did not renounce Christ, the emperor of Rome would banish him from the kingdom, and Chrysostom responded to the threat by saying that the emperor could not do so. He said, because the whole world is my Father's kingdom. And then replied the emperor, I will take away your life. To which Chrysostom said, you cannot, because my life is hid with Christ in God. Next, he threatened him with the loss of his treasure. And Chrysostom said, "You cannot, for my treasure is in heaven, where my heart is." The emperor made one last effort. "Then I will drive you away from here, and you shall have no friends left." But again, Chrysostom responded. He said, "You cannot, for I have one friend for whom you can never separate me. I defy you, for you can do me no harm." You see, Chrysostom was absolutely certain of who he was following. And I want you to understand something this morning. Jesus is not concerned about what others will think if we become real followers. He is more concerned about our level of commitment. He wants to know how committed we are to Christ. It's as if Jesus is saying, never mind about will they do this? Will they do that? Will there be problems if I follow you? Never mind the will they's. Jesus is more interested in answering the question, will you? Will you? Will you follow me? That's the most important thing. That's the thing we need to have in the forefront of our minds. Will we follow Jesus? And that's the invitation we can give to you this morning. It's not my invitation, and it's not the invitation of the First Church of Christ. It is the invitation of Jesus. Follow me. I'll make your life new. Follow me. I'll make you a fisher of men. Follow me. I'll give you a life worth living. Follow me. I will fill you with my Spirit and my presence. Follow me. It's time. It's time to do so much more than simply know Jesus. It's time to make a commitment to follow him. And this morning, we're going to sing a song that has a very familiar camp chorus interwoven all the way through it. One I grew up with in invitation times at camp. And I hope, Randy, that we'll sing this every week for the series. I hope by the end of these 4 sermons, the words that you're about to sing won't just be words, but they'll be a commitment. I have decided to follow Jesus. If you're ready to do that, we invite you to come as you are and to belong to him. Are you ready? You can do so today. If you'll come forward, even as we sing, and we'll find out where you're at in your walk and what you need to do for Christ and what it means to be a Christ follower. Let's stand together, and if you can respond to this invitation, make these words real.